Good day, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. I'm in the presence of a very special guest. His name is Vinay Orekondy, and he's an attorney and an activist from Australia. And he's here to talk to us about ranked choice voting. This is episode 22, and we have so much in store for the forum. And he has to tell us a lot about his organization, Rank the Vote, as well. He's an organizer for that particular organization, and I want to hear more about that and just really the contrast between Australia's voting system and the US voting system. I think my audience will get a lot of benefit from seeing some of the similarities and maybe differences, and maybe we can piece things together to make us have a more effective democracy. I hate using that word, but we were talking maybe about that some too. Welcome to the show, Vinay, and I appreciate you accepting that invitation.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I didn't want to go too much into your background because I want the audience to kind of get to know you because you are from Australia. And tell us kind of how you grew up in Australia and your education and what got you into the political sphere.
Yeah, okay. So my parents were actually from India originally, and they moved to Australia in the late 70s. And it was an interesting time to move to Australia because I don't know if your audience knows, but we had this thing called the White Australia policy. It was pretty nakedly racist in its immigration policy right until the late 70s, where and I mean, I think earlier on it was just openly like, we're only letting people from Europe immigrate here. Then later it became more about using tricky language tests and things like that. But eventually everyone knew what it was for. And then in the mid 70s, that policy was repealed by a progressive government. My parents came not long after that. Right. They were in England before that, and before that, India. So my dad did his like ophthalmology in the UK. And then they found it too cold and they decided they were either going to move here. They were either going to move here, which I don't know if maybe been slightly better if they'd moved to the south, but then an opportunity came up in Australia, so they went to Australia. Um, and the yeah, it's I mean, it was a good safe. It's a good set. Like every impression that Americans tend to have of Australia, except for the dangerous animals thing. Like that's if you have to get out of the cities. I mean, there is a lot of wildlife. There's no doubt, but you have to get out of the cities. It's actually the cities are it's an incredibly urban environment. Like where most people live in Australia is heavily urbanized, much more than the US. The US is actually much more spread out. Like, you've got big cities, but there's a lot of people living in the middle too, right? Australia, it's like 90%, 95% plus of the population lives in 5 cities, which do not have a lot of wildlife in them. So a lot of the memes we see online are like, that's as much of a mystery to, when we see like strange animals online from Australia, that's crazy for us too. So, but generally politically, it's a very stable country, almost too stable. In fact, I'd say it has the opposite problem to the US in that the US is too high energy politically. Like that's why it's supercharged and polarized, and right now people tearing it, like the country's almost ripping itself apart over politics. Whereas in Australia, there's almost like a complete lack of political energy and all the problems that come with that. It hasn't always been like that, but we can get to why that's a cause if you're interested. But it's like often people are politically complacent. They're happy to let things be as they are. And because of that, problems come up. Like, for example, it's not known that our local councils are amongst the most corrupt in the Western world, because people just don't pay attention to local politics at all. And so, developers just get in and just start funding campaigns. And so, the Australian government has historically and even more recently committed some serious human rights abuses against Indigenous people and against refugees. But the thing is that they do it out of people's eyes. Like they either do in the middle of the country somewhere, against Indigenous people, or they will have an offshore processing place for refugees. And then, as I said, Australia, because it's such a big country and there's so few people, and there's this complacency, what you get is this out of sight, out of mind attitude. And and that's how those abuses go. And I think the country, when people become aware and when they wake up to problems, they really jump on board. But it can take a while to get there. It can take a while to get there. Yeah.
It's interesting, some of the stuff you said. I was thinking about the out of sight, out of mind. That happens a lot here too, especially with and that's the reason why, because I'd say for the last 15 years, I've kind of disassociated myself with both parties. But I grew up being like a pretty liberal person. And I know liberal has a completely different meaning in Australia because liberal actually means conservative, I think, in Australia, right?
I think most people these days will understand the term in the American sense, because we actually have a phrase, we say capital L liberal or small L liberal, because capital L liberal refers to the political party, and that's the Conservative Party, right?
Oh, okay.
Because they were free market liberals, and then they teamed up with the social conservatives, and that's how they became a conservative party. And they're quite, so that's how it happened, right? And there's a similar genesis to conservative parties here, right? But it's, I think that it's, but we said, if you say small L liberal, everyone will understand the American sense of the term.
Yeah, so when we have, just like we have Biden in now, and there's actually been more arrests and detainees when it comes to the border and ICE, which was something formed by George Bush, the administration. And now that administration is almost viewed favorably by the people who support Biden, because my whole theory is that both parties are the same party anyway in the United States, because the power is so consolidated that really both teams need each other. So it really just becomes one big club and everyone else is ostracized from the club. And then you had all the attention about the border when Trump was in, but people are being locked up and their families have been separated at the border. Now no one talks about it. And that's a dangerous thing because of the complacency aspect you talked about. The energy gets so high, but then it also gets very low depending on the political cycle. But I had a question about what you said with the complacency of the people in Australia. What's the political population when you talk about participation there? Are we talking about high percentages of everyone voting? What's that?
We have compulsory voting, so yeah. But I mean, it's still not 100%. But some people, because the way it works is that when you turn 18, you're meant to register to vote. Some people just don't ever register. And I don't think that I don't know if there's a penalty if you don't register, but they just never register it, and but if you do and you don't vote, you're supposed to get fined, and some people do, but it's a relatively small fine. It's and then some people just take it. Some people just take the fine, like $100, $50 to $100 or something like that. And it's not always enforced properly. Having said that, our voting rate is like 92%. I think in recent years it slipped to about 88%, but it's still extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
And that having compulsory voting changes the dynamic considerably. One of the big changes that comes from it, and I think it does have a stabilizing force, but not necessarily in a good way, because you'll often have people who are just politically apathetic, they're just there because they have to be there. They'll vote the way their families voted just because, and we'll talk about how ranked choice voting works there. And there's this thing called how to vote cards. Often the marketing on the day will determine how people vote, right? So there are people standing outside the vote. I know here you can't take material into voting booths. There you can. You'll put these cards in people's hands, and which suggest vote for us, and people will, up to 40% of people will make their minds up on the day. So there's this rush to get these materials into people's hands before they walk into the booth. So I don't know if I'm sold on compulsory voting being a good thing. And it just wouldn't work in a country this size. It's not something I'd recommend or is even plausible here.
Well, we have here a problem with, and I don't even know if it's a problem. I'll have to say that because I'm pretty apathetic about the electoral system. I'm almost at a point where direct action, I focus more on that stuff and social issues outside of the electoral system. But we have maybe half the country that don't vote in the United States.
Mhm.
And, that can be for socioeconomic reasons. I think a lot of it is a class struggle issue. And some people they feel they're so disenfranchised as it is. What's the point of going in and voting? What's the point of me going in and pushing a single vote for a candidate? Is that going to really change my tangible everyday life? And that's a huge concern. So I definitely see the benefits of compulsory voting, but at the same time, there's probably not a perfect system. But we definitely have an apathetic issue in the United States, and I think a lot of that does have to do with the revolving door of the D and the R every single election cycle. Even at the local levels, we have a serious problem where you can't even be an independent and be seriously taken from the people around you because they don't even know who the people are. There's no
Yeah.
visibility aspect to it.
Yeah. And I have a theory onto like obviously, I'm here because I believe in voting reform, but I know it's not the only answer. Definitely not. And it's part of a wider system of answers. And if we go really, really big picture for a moment about like my theories as to the cause of the disenfranchisement is that I think the US as a country is so steeped in individualism. It's that what's happened is that it's cut off a vital connection between people on the ground and their election system, and that's groups, communities, right? Because so it's if you're like one of 300 million people, right, by itself, of course you're going to feel your vote doesn't count, right? Or if you're in a state that's all blue or all red. But if you're part of a very active political community, then you can see that bigger picture, right? But the country has been very good at destroying most senses of community, right? So I think that the key to repairing the election system, along with sensible reforms like ranked choice voting, which we'll get to, which unrig the system, is to also rebuild really, really strong communities, which will get the message to people so that they're not just reliant on, media, right? If you think about it as a, like almost as a diagram, if you have like many, many millions of individuals that aren't talking to each other, then whoever has the loudest megaphone is going to reach the most number of people, right? So that's why the corporate media is so powerful in this country, is because we're not connected to each other, right? So community is the key. It's how we fight back, and it's also how we achieve changes like ranked choice voting, incidentally. So I'm here to advocate not only just for an election reform, I'm also here to advocate for the method of getting there and for repairing the country more generally, both politically and in general, and that is rebuilding communities.
I like that. I really do love the way you place that into the conversation. I definitely believe that we've lost a sense of community, and there's a fragmentation that has been deliberate because when you have such a limitation of options, or at least a perception of a limitation of options, you tend to vote against your interest of your community, and there's so much of a focus on presidency. There's not much focus on the local level. And even myself, following politics so long, the local level has to be, we have to be educated that local level connects to the larger system. And I don't think we really taught that. We're sort of brainwashed and propagandized into thinking that the 2-year and the 4-year cycle is the biggest, most important part of the electoral system. When what you're saying is, no, we need to have a community conscious effort to even starting from the local level, showing how these issues impact our communities before we even talk about the bigger picture. But I did want to
go ahead. Okay, just to quickly, I want to say that moving forward, I think the local and the state are more important than the national, right? Because I think it's pretty clear from national politics that we're just going to enter a period where very little is going to happen, right? Like nothing, not a whole lot has happened for a while, right? You know, you can get some, I mean, things get passed sometimes, you know, but split Congress, nothing is going to happen, right? And so if we start from the assumption that federal politics is going to be, nothing is going to happen for a while, then we need to start thinking, well, if we want to achieve anything, then we need to start thinking state and local, right? And we can't wait. We can't wait for the federal, because it's not going to happen at this point, right? So, you know, if we, whatever our issue is, whether we're on the right, whether we're on the left, whatever we want our utopia to look like, we should start developing leaders, building communities, and making it happen. All right. So that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, so I continue.
No, I love that. That you added on to that, because I was going to go into more Australia. I want the audience to kind of get that sense of what's happening there. Like, what kind of a government do you even have in Australia, and how many political parties are there, for instance?
Sure. So we have currently, I think there's 42 federally
42?
registered. Yeah. Having said that, there's not, you know, most of them don't have a representative, right, in Parliament. But there's a few reasons why we have so many. Well, actually, how many? I think there's at least 6 or 7 that have representation in Parliament, which is still, you know, a huge step up from here, right? So, but the reason we have 42 is there's a couple of reasons for that. Is that one, it's relatively easy to register a federal party. It used to be even easier. All you needed was 500 members and $500, right? So it was super easy, right? But now they've made it they've tripled it. It's 1,500 members and $500. So, and you also get audited every couple of years to make sure you have the requisite number of members. But the other reason that we have so many parties is because there's a point. We have ranked choice voting, right? And it totally changes the game. It makes it possible for small parties to get elected, and independents, and they regularly are, right? So in our Senate, like for the longest time, our Senate, we've had many independents and third parties. Often the balance of power, you know, is controlled by a minor party, right? It's frequent in our Senate is that the deciding votes will belong to some small party, so they'll have to be negotiated. Recently, it's a little bit hard and I can get into the way our Senate is set up. If we, you know, get into detail, but the way our Senate is set up, the voting system we use, it's a little bit different. It's still a kind of a ranked choice voting, but it's an even better form, makes it easier for small parties to get elected. In our lower house, we also use ranked choice voting, but a different system. It's not quite as easy. But the dissatisfaction with our 2 largest parties has gotten so much that a lot more small parties have started winning in the lower house as well. And I think we have now, it's 15 out of 150 seats in our lower house, or maybe it's 17. It's you know, so at least 10% of our lower house is run by an independent or a smaller party. And most of that actually happened in the last election, right? In one election, I think like 9 or 10 seats from the major parties were wiped out and given to an independent or smaller party. But ultimately, all of this goes back to ranked choice voting. Yeah. So
when you say ranked choice voting, I've heard this for years, and it sounds like a great solution to transition us into a new era. But it's almost like the system here was never set up for ranked choice voting to be a possibility. Like, that's the way it seems to me. Just, you have the Federal Election Commission, which is run by Democrats and Republicans. Like, it's like all the main corpuses are ran by the quote unquote the 2 parties. So how do we, what else will we need to do? And we will get into the ranked choice votings and the different types of systems, but what would need to be in place for ranked choice voting to be more effective, you think, like immediately?
Do you mean in Australia or here?
in the United States.
Okay. So I think just before we get into it, is it okay if I just give your audience just a quick explanation of what it is?
Sure,
Yeah.
definitely.
So right now in the US, your system of voting it's called first past the post. But what that means is that you go in, you vote for one person, right? You've got a ballot, you might have 10 people on your ballot. You go in, you just tick someone, and whoever gets the most number of votes wins the election. Let's say if you had, you have lots of candidates, the person who gets the most number of votes might only have like 30% of support, like only 30% of people voted for them. That's not a majority at all, is it really? Like it's not very representative of what the electorate wants. So someone who won, and that's why you've got this concept of splitting the vote here, right? And people here, as a result, are you going to vote for a smaller party here or an independent? Probably not, because if you're afraid of the other major party, you're going to vote, say, well, I really like this independent. I really like them. But let's say you're conservative, right? You really like this independent, but you don't like the Democrats at all, right? So you say, well, I don't want to help the Democrats. So if I vote for this independent, I'll be helping the Democrats. So I'm going to vote for this Republican who I don't like that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happens under this system over time, and because that's why you've got your two parties which have so much strength. And so that's what in Australia we do is we've got this system called ranked choice voting, where you can say, okay, if the conservative person could say, I really like this independent, right? So I'm going to put one for them. But I also then, if that independent doesn't win, I want my vote to go to another independent, for example. Okay, then you could put a 2 for them. Then who's my third choice? The Republican. Okay, so I'll put a 3 for the Republican. And what happens is that if your candidate, your first choice doesn't win, your vote will go to the second. If your second doesn't win, it goes to the third, and so forth, as far down as you ranked. Right? So the idea is that you can't waste your vote. Cannot waste your vote. And suddenly people are free to vote for whoever they want, right? They don't have to, and it increases voter choice. And this is why we have so many parties in Australia, and why a lot of them do well. We still do have 2 major parties that do very well. And that's fine, because they've done in Australia, I'd say that they represent major interests in our society in Australia. So, and that's fine. That's a good thing, right? If like political organization is a good thing. But right now the system is rigged in a way so that you can't, so that it can't change out of the status quo.
Oh, yes. Well, it's definitely rigged. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It's,
I just want to answer your
yeah.
original question. Okay, so in Australia, we also used to have first past the post as well, right? So a system can change out of first past the post into a ranked choice system. What happened was that we've had it for 100 years. So,
wow.
Yeah. So near the end of World War One, we had a party called the Nationalist Party that was governing, and they were a far right party, and then and the Labour Party, the opposition, which is kind of like the Democrats here, both them and they were in agreement with I believe, I need to confirm this, with the Nationalist Party that conscription should be a thing. So the 2 parties had the same position. So a new party formed, a right-wing party that was anti-conscription. So they had a bit of a libertarian bent to them. And the Nationalist Party said, don't run, you'll split the vote, you play spoiler, I'm sure you've heard all these terms before.
Yeah.
And this party said, we don't care, we hate conscription, so we're going to just run anyway. And I think that they may have actually thrown a few seats to Labour in the process, maybe even deliberately. At that point, the Nationalist Party buckled and said, okay, we can't risk this anymore, we're going to institute ranked choice voting. And so that way that people who really were anti-conscription would vote one for the anti-conscription party, but if they're still right-leaning, they might vote two for the nationalists and so forth. And that way they weren't going to lose seats to Labour, right? So that's what happened there. So I think, so to move, how do we get it here is that I think that there are certain, like there's certainly on the Democrat side, I think they have a muscle memory of things that have occurred, like Bush v. Gore. They remember that, what happened with in Florida, and possibly may have happened in 2016.
Oh yeah.
So they have muscle memory of times where ranked choice voting would have assisted them, and so that's why I think they're starting to come on board. I think there are parts of the Republican Party that are coming on board. Probably the parts that are now, but that used to be the GOP old guard, are kind of coming on board. So you're starting to see parts of the from that memory. But I think to truly answer your question about how do we get it, is that it's got nothing to do with the party. It's got everything to do with us building movements for it, because it's just a better system, right? If we have to forget about our partisan choice for a moment, say, I'm left, I'm right, whatever, and just say, look, this is just, the system right now makes no sense, right? This is what we've got. It doesn't, what we're proposing is a better system. It doesn't benefit anyone, right? It does, except the voter. The only person who comes out of this a winner is the voter, right? And so we've got to build movements to support that.
And ranked choice voting makes people more educated. It forces you to learn more about the candidates, because you're not simply choosing just one person and then it's like your vote just goes away, disappears, whatever. And once the election's over, it's like, oh gosh, like, why did my vote even matter? And then we have the issue with the different states, like you feel like you're a prisoner of the moment when you're in a state that's already predetermined, because it goes like red every single cycle or whatever it does, even in your district. But I wanted to get to, are there different types of ranked choice voting systems? Because I've seen a lot of chatter about this. Like, what does ranked choice voting mean? Is that like a general term that represents multiple types of ranked choice voting systems?
There's at least there's quite a few. I said the three most important versions. There's three of them, right? And yeah, I'd say there's three that we should consider. One is called proportional representation, which is used in the Australian Senate and in a couple other some of the state lower houses. And the Fair Vote, who's the leading kind of think tank around ranked choice voting, they strongly advocate for proportional representation. It is the best system. There's also what's versions, like a version called single member districts, which is where I unless you want me to go into, it can get a bit technical here. I don't know if you want me to go into that.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll explain each of the systems. So we'll start with the simplest one, which is called. So right now you have one person representing one seat, called single member districts, right? So like let's say certain people in a particular geographic area, right? That geographic area will have one representative, right? That seems to make sense on some level. And so single member district ranked choice voting is where, like, you would have, like, it's say in the primary, say a Democratic primary or a Republican primary or Libertarian primary, you would have a group of people wanting to be the candidate to run in that seat. And then you'd have a ranked choice election in the primary for each of those parties. And then in the general election, when you've got one candidate from each party or independents as well, then you'd have ranked choice between them. So you could rank them. So that, and then so that's the single member district approach. And that's what the Australian lower house has. Now there's another approach that I mentioned before called proportional representation, which the Australian Senate uses. So think of it this way. You can have, as I said, right, in single member districts, you've got, for one geographic area, you have one representative. Now imagine if you had a larger geographic area, and you just kind of combine that all into one and combined all of their representatives. So like New York State, for example, instead of like, okay, I'm a representative of New York 3, I'm a representative of New York 4, I'm a representative of New York 5. What if you just combine the vote of everybody in the state, and then you looked at the total number of votes and then gave to each party the number of representatives based on how much they did. So let's say all of New York votes for like 10% of the vote goes to the Green Party, 20% goes to the Libertarian Party, 20% goes to the Republican Party, and 50% goes to the Democrats, hypothetical, right? Then that's how many seats they would get, that proportion of the seats. So it's like they're representing the whole area, and they're getting, it's like, does that make sense?
Isn't that kind of what they do for the presidential elections here in the Democratic primaries, state by state? Is it kind of like that where they proportionalize the vote some?
Yeah, within the electoral college, yeah, because they don't, if they're not a winner take all state,
exactly,
right, then they'll give you a certain number of electors based on what percentage of the vote you got.
Yes.
Yeah. I know. Actually, it's been a while since I've looked at how the primaries are set up, but some of them, I believe, are still winner take all states, or are they all?
Almost all of them. I think only Maine, and you have that one district in Nebraska that uses, like Omaha has its own system.
That's in the general election. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the primaries.
Yeah, the primaries, it may be different. Like states like New Hampshire may be different, but
no,
I'm not.
I think in the primaries, a lot of them now are proportional. So
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I should know this because I worked in the primaries, but that was like 3 years ago. So yeah, in 2020. So that what they will do, my belief in a lot of the early states is they'll, in the Democratic primary specifically, is if you win 60% of the votes, then you'll win 60% of the delegates. So the proportional representation system is kind of based on the same principle, right? Except instead of delegates, it's representatives, right? And so the reason that's good for not just small parties, but also minorities as well, is that because if you cut it up into smaller and small areas, one, you've got gerrymandering, which is a big problem, right? So this kills gerrymandering immediately, right? It's not an issue anymore. But second is that, let's say you have a substantial minority. Let's say you've got a big Latino population in an area, but the districts are shaped in such a way that the Latino population is, let's say that, I don't know, 40% of a state, right? But the districts are shaped in such a way that always a small minority within those districts. Then they'll never properly, within those single member districts, they'll never be able to properly have representation or expression. But within proportional, they'll get much better representation, right? Because it's measured off the percentage of the whole area, right? So to give an example, let's say in a particular state, Latinos are very geared towards the Green Party, right? Just a particular state. Then if in single member districts, what will happen is that the Latinos are making up no more than 15 to 20% of that seat, they may not be able to get that Green Party person elected, right? But if it's measured across the entire state, you could get close to that full 40%. Let's say it's 35% of the state are voting Green because most of them are Latino and they're supporting this Green candidate. Then they'll get all the Green Party. Then you would get 35% of the slate would go to the Green representatives. So that's the proportional representation system.
And that's used in the Senate of Australia?
Correct. And some of the state houses as well. Yeah. Do you have any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll go to the third one.
No, this is awesome. No, I think my audience can follow along. If I'm following along, I think they are too. No, this is good.
Good. So the third system is, and this is developed in the US, and it's a uniquely American solution, is called Final Four or Final Five, and that's what they use in Alaska. And it's to account for the fact that primaries are a big thing here, right? And the reason why this system doesn't exist in Australia, we don't really have primaries. The parties have a lot of control in Australia over who their candidates are. And sometimes even the party members don't even have much control. It's really bad. That's why I think primaries are an excellent idea, right? So there's an idea called open primaries, which is included in this Final Five system. And open primaries are where, okay, instead of like, everyone is just, the Democrats are going to have their primary, the Republicans are going to have their primary, the Greens are going to have their primary, the Libertarians will have their primary, and independents are just kind of left out, right? Which is, that the idea is, why don't we combine them all into one primary? Like, why does that matter? Because in many states in this country, it's really almost one party rule, right? So and as a result, it's the primary that matters. Okay, so it's not that the general election is almost like a confirmation, right? So what an open primary does is that an open primary is a couple of things, is that it sort of breaks the system open, or it changes the role the parties play in it. It's called a jungle primary as well. So you could have like 60 people. Like, I think in Alaska, they had 60 people run in the jungle primary. So everyone, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Greens, everybody. Someone called Santa Claus. I think Santa Claus actually came sixth as well. So he really did do out of 60. That's pretty good. And instead of the parties being able to say, this is our candidate, people can say, I'm a Democrat, or they can self-nominate which party. So the first thing it does is that parties you don't have a problem of ballot access anymore. Like, a lot of small parties struggle to get onto ballot access, meaning that they can't get like thousands of signatures in order to get onto the ballot. And, that stops them in a lot of places. But what this does, this just gets rid of that whole thing. And people can say, I belong to this party, and that gets put on the ballot. Now, that might be like, what if someone just says that they belong to a party that they don't? Then it's up to the party itself to support and rally around a candidate or candidates. Say, look, we don't like that person at all, but we really like these people. So let's say in Alaska, in that 60 people running, and like, let's say of them, I don't know, 25 say they're Democrats, right? But the party doesn't really like, most of them. They like 3 of them. Okay. Then so let's say there's 5 of them that they think are like straight up in opposition to their policies. Then they'll say, look, we strongly do not support, they may have Democratic name, but we don't support them. We support these 3. We're endorsing these 3. We're going to campaign for these 3. And so the party's role shifts from control to influence. Right. And I think that's healthy. And what happens is that the jungle primary is still by the traditional voting system, the first past the post. So, and everyone just gets one vote. It's simple. And from there, the people who are the top 4 or the top 5 of that will advance to a general election. General election is a ranked choice voting election.
Okay, so rewind that back again. So you said it's just a single position after the primary is over, before it goes to the general?
So in the primary, it's everybody's running in one primary. Right, an open primary, so Democrats, and then the people, you just get the normal voting style, the traditional voting style of like one person, you just vote for one candidate, right? Of the say 60 or however many there are, the top 4 or top 5 of those move from the primary to the general election.
And that's ranked choice.
That is ranked choice. Yeah.
And you say previous to that, there's no ballot access restrictions whatsoever to the pile of everyone in there together.
Correct. So
Wow.
anyone can run.
That's a massive change. Is that already baked into the system that's implemented?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a lot of places that are
Game changer.
considering. Yeah, a lot. Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's the part, like, many people complain that it's very, like, you have to network and make friends with all the right people in the parties in order to run. And, and unless you have that name attached, you can't do anything, or you can't even run. This simplifies it a lot. So the Final Five system is a very good system, I think, as well. So, so we at Rank the Vote, we support anything which includes ranked choice votes on proportional, single member, Final Five. If whatever a locality wants to go with, we will support that as long as it's a form of ranked choice voting.
I had a couple of viewers and people who follow the show who they mentioned single transferable vote. Is that something that's already something that you covered, or is that a different type of ranked choice voting?
Yeah, so no, that's the that's what we have in Australia. It's like as also as a kind of proportional representation. And it's also, that's sort of it's a term that's used here as well. Is single. It's actually a term that doesn't exist in Australia. We don't say STV. So, and that's what you have within proportional systems. So for example, and the way it will often. And I'm still kind of getting my head around this concept, since it's an American concept, right? So, and I'd be interested if your viewers want to correct me on this, then feel free. But my understanding is that it's within these proportional systems where you can, like, okay, I'm voting for, if I put one for Labor, for example, in Australia, that's one of the parties, and then if the Labor candidates, don't win, then my vote will transfer to my second choice, the Greens, so forth. So it is ranked choice, but within the proportional system.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And so, when people say ranked choice voting within the United States context, because I think there's 20 states that kind of use that system, right?
There's 62 municipalities which use it, which includes, on a statewide level, it's used in 2 places. So that's Maine and Alaska. But the rest are all cities, but including New York and San Francisco, Seattle now. So some big cities are using it too. But on statewide, it's currently Maine and Alaska. And Maine uses it for presidential as well, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So
I guess my question now would be, how do we kind of is there anything that we have to do to get this to make this a thing all across the country? Is it as simple as having like a ballot measure at the local level, and could that ballot measure automatically install ranked choice voting for the state? Like, is that a possibility, or is that just wishful thinking?
No, that's exactly what's been happening. So there's lots of different ways. So the first thing is that, like, so Fair Vote, their goal ultimately is the Fair Representation Act, which is on a federal level, we would have single transferable vote for all elections, right? So a piece of legislation. That's a long, we know that's a while, right? So what we want to do is work from the ground up. So that's why we're working on cities and states to get it. So now it very much depends on the local law with cities. So in some cases you need, for cities to do it, they have the power to just adopt it, right? The city legislature can simply just adopt it by vote, right? Or there's the city council. Some cases the city will need to put it to a vote, right? To a vote. In some other cases, it can be initiated by citizens, right? And some statewide level, you have the same dynamics. Sometimes that state can simply pass legislation, and that's it. Sometimes it's required that it passes by legislation, right? Other places they'll have to have a ballot measure, and that can often be either in some places those ballot measures can be initiated by citizen signatories or by reference from the state, right? So there's many, and in other cases, and this is where it gets even more complicated, is that for cities to have it, you need, it's what's called a local options bill, where the state has to pass a bill giving cities the choice to do it. Yeah, so there's a whole variety. So really, if you want to, but no one should get dissuaded, because like in 2016, I think there were 10 municipalities that had it. Now we're at 62. Okay, wow. So the momentum is extraordinary, right? And like I think for a while, like San Francisco was the first by a long way, as it often is, right? I think they had it like 20 years ago. Burlington, Vermont had it and then repealed it, but are now have it again. But as I said, the last couple of years, it's just exploded. So my recommendation is that if you want to get involved, is find your state movement. I think there's only there's activity in all but 5 states. So you can find your state movement at our website, which is rankthevote.us, and there's like a find your state movement, and that state movement will have will be aware of how you can of what's needed in your state, right? If you want to get it in your city, then your state movement will support you in getting it in your city. And as I said, it will, but they'll at very least be able to inform you on what the situation is in your state. Okay, do we need to get statewide legislation passed first? Do we need to initiate a ballot measure through signatures? You know, they'll be able to let you know on what measures are needed, but it really is dependent on your location.
I have about 3 more questions before we conclude, and who knows, my 3 questions may end up being 6, but
that's okay.
I was wondering, you said something about San Francisco earlier, and you're saying that the city of San Francisco already has a ranked choice voting apparatus in place. So how is it that Nancy Pelosi didn't have really any sort of opposition to her when she was running within that district? I think she's out of San Francisco, I think. So how was she like uncontested basically all those years?
So this is on the city level. So she's a federal representative. So they only had it on the city level. Yeah. So federally, the only places that it's only Maine and Alaska where you'll see people in federal Congress being affected by ranked choice voting currently. Yeah. And I think it's because and this is why we advocate the city upward approach, is because, like, you know, people get worried as the stakes start getting higher and higher, and, you know, federal, like we just want to get people used to it by keeping it close first, right? So if there's anything that your viewers should take out of today, is start at home, start local, whether it be for ranked choice or more broadly for building communities, right? That is how change will begin, is right in your city and with your neighbors.
I had a question that was kind of related to that one. So Gavin Newsom got recalled and he retained his governorship of California. Was that a ranked choice voting system, or was that just the traditional, just select candidate?
Correct. And I believe, I don't remember.
But wasn't it thrown in a pile, like all of the people, like there were lots of independents and a lot of third-party people who were running against him.
You know, okay, you'll have to let me know here if there was there a two-parter? Like, as in, should we recall him? And then if we do recall him, who should replace him? That was my understanding, but I could be wrong on that.
Wait, they voted on it again, and he ended up, you know, winning it, you know, against, you know.
Oh, yes, you're right. I think they did vote to recall him, and then he ran as a candidate and won again.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Larry Elder and all these Republicans, independents, and there were Green Party people running.
Okay,
they obviously did get the same. It sounded kind of like what you were referring to earlier, with everyone sort of just piled in together.
Yeah, so no, that's not because so the only statewide system that uses Final Five is Alaska, and remember, as I said, California does not use it statewide, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was just a traditional first past the post election, where one person will go in, vote for one candidate, and leave the ballot box. Your results would change potentially if you had ranked choice, right? And I've seen that, but I mean, I think the other thing though that like there's many other changes that come out of ranked choice that I think you should be aware of is that it changes the tone of your politics completely. And here's why: is that like I would say American politics is a shock for me. Like I moved here 3 years ago, and like everything, it's just about destroying your opponent, like
Oh
just
yeah.
like absolute laying waste to them, like dig up the most egregious personal stuff you can, make stuff up, like it's just horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Australia, because you need your like obviously you'll have your primary rival, right? And but you there's many other people, like the small parties in particular, you need their voters to support you, right? You need them to rank you to get over the line. So what do they do? They're nice to each other, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
nice to each other, and they and that changes the whole tone of everything. Like it's politics in Australia is just less destructive because they're required to not only be nice to each other, but to trade policy with each other. And I've worked closely with parties, like small parties, independents, and advocacy organizations, by the way, which I'll get to in a moment, who have they only exist to lobby the major parties. They only run candidates solely for the purpose of lobbying larger parties using ranked choice. They'll be like, okay, well, vote one for our candidate, obviously. If we're the Voluntary Euthanasia Party, for example, which is an actual party, we know we're not going to win, right? But we're going to go into a close seat where there's two major parties. We're going to and we're going to lobby both of them, right? And whichever one adopts the strongest version of the policy we advocate, we'll tell our voters to put them as number two.
Mm.
And that's happened. So I've seen some work with small parties who've gotten both major parties to adopt some version of their policy position, right? And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but this thing called a how to vote card. Yeah, I think I did mention that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So every candidate will issue that, and there'll be like vote one for me, but vote 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the other candidates. And in Australia, we have mandatory rankings, so you have to like in the single member ones and the House ones, you have to rank every candidate, or your vote doesn't count. I don't advocate for that system, but that's what we have there. I think the American versions are better, but where you could choose how many you want to rank. But in Australia, you've got to rank them all. What happens then is that these cards, the negotiations of the cards will essentially determine election outcomes, right? And so advocacy organizations will go in and issue these how to vote cards. They're like an endorsement, right? Here.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll negotiate with the major parties, well, with every party, small parties, major parties, independents, see where they stand on policy and say, if you support, let's say you're climate change activists, right? If you to vote climate, vote one for the Green Party, two for the Progressive Party, three for the Labour Party, four for this independent, so forth, right? And in a close race, that can make all the difference, right? So advocacy organizations, smaller parties get so much power under the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the tone of your politics changes. Power is given to voters, through determining choice. Power is given to smaller voices, to who can just, community voices. Everything about it is just better.
100% collaboration and not as much competition. I believe personally, I'm all about coalition building. There's a lot of coalition building that happens behind the scenes, especially with direct actions and protest movements. Like the anti-war movements are really starting to become rejuvenated in the United States again, which is good. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes where lots of people are putting their differences aside. And I think that's how we need to do things. We're not going to agree on every single issue, but that's a lot of issues that multiple party different affiliated people agree on. And it's like, if you just stop focusing on the tribe aspect of it and focus more on, do I care about this issue? This person does too. It doesn't matter what affiliation they're a part of. Like, why can't we work on this together and work as a country together and get things, done? And like you said, civility is a really important thing. Just that discourages voter turnout. It discourages people in believing in the system when all they see are people just screaming and fighting all the time in the chamber.
Yeah, and interesting you mentioned coalition building, because what I did in Australia was there was a lot of small parties that had a progressive tilt, and I was working closely with them for a while. In what they did is they had a rule amongst themselves, is that we all have to preference or rank each other first, right? So it was a block, and it doesn't matter who you rank first or in what order in the block. And that was the process of negotiation. But everyone inside this block must be ranked above everyone outside the block. And then I represented them as a block to the major parties for policy negotiation and ranking negotiation and things like that. So we were able to use ranked choice voting to multiply our power significantly as a group of smaller voices. And we would get our policies adopted regularly, right? Because they needed our vote. There's nothing idealistic about it. They needed our supporters' ranks, Yeah.
Howie Hawkins, who is part of the Green Party, he talked about how he got Cuomo when he was still in New York. He got him to basically concede to some of their demands because he had enough of a presence at the state level. And somehow his policy was able to influence the Democratic Party in that instance. So you do see that sometimes here, but not on the same scale, I think, as Australia.
Yeah. And I think the risk here that people are starting to see is that if people get too disenfranchised by politics, then they just will stay at home, right? I mean, some will vote third party, or if someone votes third party or stays at home, then if you're a major party, that's a risk for you, right? So, and that's happening on both sides now, right? So I think that's why a lot of the majors are starting to see, hang on, we can't keep disenfranchising people with this system. That's why we've got to improve. So that's why I'm optimistic. Is that I think that even people I talk to with my work, I'm talking to major parties all the time. And they see the sense in these arguments. That's why, it's against their interest to have people staying at home or voting third party and not being able to collect that vote, right? So this is why we will get change. It's inevitable, I would say, at this point.
And I'll tell you, I like to, I guess, put the facade on, for the crowd sometimes, because my whole thing, and I was telling a person I interviewed yesterday, Jay Clark, I was telling them, my whole thing is 50% pessimism, 50% optimism. I kind of base it on the situation. But the more I hear about this and talking to you and the information I'm getting, it does give me more hope than I had before about electoralism. It does. But it's crucial to have this information. And you've answered all my questions in a very concise way. And I think people just need that information so they can make better decisions and inform people about this. There are other alternatives than what we're doing. We don't have to be in a limbo. We can actually do something about our situation. It may not change overnight, but at least the mental current is going in the right direction. And to me, that's just as important as the physical, going and voting for people, the psychological aspect of it, which is demoralized a lot of the populace here because of the system that we have. I do have 3 more questions before you go, and I think I can get them in. But I did have a question about the ranked choice. Is there a quota? Because when you say ranked choice, what determines how many people are on that list? Because where's the cutoff when you say all the people on the ranked choice voting list? Is it 20 candidates, 30 candidates? And how do you cut them off?
Okay, so it depends on which of those three. I mentioned those 3 systems. It depends which of those systems you have. So in the single member, it's as many people nominate. So if let's say in Australia, I ran for the seat of Strathfield, right? And you could only have one, and there was only so many state registered parties, right? And so you had to be a registered state party and to run, or an independent, and then and each rep party can only have one person, right? So I think we had about 6 or 7, but technically we could have had an infinite number of independents, but that just hasn't been a problem, right? You could technically have like 400 people, right? But I've just never seen that happen. I think the most I've ever seen was like 12 in that single member. Now, on proportional representation, like in our Senate, we famously have had a lot, right? In fact, because the smaller parties and independents have a much better shot under proportional representation, they will run. And so we had and because it's statewide, and it's not just your small area, it's statewide, you'll get these gigantic Senate ballots. It's kind of a joke, where a famous joke in Australia, like the Senate ballot is as long as a CVS receipt. Like, that's how we explain it to Americans, right? It's like this, you can't even see it on the screen, but it's really long. It's arm to arm, and you have to fold it up 3 times before you put it in the slot. And so there's no limit there either, because lots of groups can run as an independent, and as many as want to. And there's currently 40 parties. There used to be 60 or even 80 parties at one point. Then, and because it was so easy to start a party, you had some joke parties around. You had a party called the Coke and the Bubblers Party, which meant I think it's called a water fountain here. And their only policy was to put Coca-Cola in the water fountains. So what I'm saying is that you had you can have gigantic ballots under that. Under Final 5, the Alaska model, in the jungle primary, those will be big, right? Especially if it's a statewide race. That's why there's 60 people running in that open primary, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no limit on that at all. The limit that is placed is that there's often a fee to run, right? So that's the limit. But once past the primary, there's only 4 or 5 people, right? It's Final 4 or Final 5 in that. So that is a self-created limit. But yeah, technically, that's also a problem that exists under our current system in the US, is that as many people can run as want to run, but people don't, because it's a fee, and unless you're going to take it seriously, it's not worth the fee. So, but I don't think I wouldn't say that's ever been a huge problem anywhere, except that Australian Senate, where we just have those giant ballots that we deal with it.
Referring to your Luke Parsher interview, you've done several interviews with him, but there was one instance in particular where you talked about your organization. That's going to be my final question, learning a little bit more about Ring to Vote. So hypothetically, the last election, if we had a ranked choice voting system in the Democratic primary, Biden wouldn't even have been a choice, I think, based on the initial popularity, because I think Bernie had already won the first 3 contests in the primaries. And I think at the time, Biden's popularity was very low. I think he was polling 7, pretty consistently, early on. So under a ranked choice voting system, how would it have looked with Bernie being 1 and maybe Warren being within the top 3? I think Buttigieg was pretty high up. How would that happen? Would those people be dropped off after the 5th person?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, because each state would have its, let's say we had a ranked choice system, a universal one, right? Each state would have its own ranked choice system, right? And what happened? So what would have happened? Actually, I think it. And I worked for Bernie Sanders in that primary, right? But I think that you had a lot of centrist candidates running, right? And they all pulled. They actually would have. I actually think they would have benefited from a ranked choice, the centrist candidates, because what would have well, actually, no. Okay, there's 2 interpretations of this, of what could have happened, and remember, we're looking state by state here. So without looking at the data, the centrist candidates would have benefited from a ranked choice system, because you'd think that like Klobuchar and Buttigieg and well, I know they didn't like each other very much, but their policy positions were terribly dissimilar, or Biden, you would think that their voters would all rank each other, and they would and they would boost each other above a progressive, right? So that's the without looking at the data. When you actually did look at the data, Bernie was the second choice of a lot of candidates,
Even the
like
Biden
voters.
voters.
Yeah, a lot of the voters. So
Mm-hmm.
so really what would have happened is that they probably would have put like Biden 1, Bernie 2, or Amy 1, and Amy Klobuchar 1, Bernie 2, or whatever. And Pete Buttigieg voters too, like Pete 1, Bernie 2. And then you add them to the people who put Bernie 1, which is obviously quite a lot, and then that probably would have taken him over the line in individual states. Obviously there was a whole other dynamic there, which, when like the other centrist candidates dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden, which I think, and they did that to avoid vote splitting. But I think the effect of the endorsements is more like it was like, if you think of that almost in ranked choice terms, it's like saying, well, don't vote for us, send your 1 to Joe Biden, right? So in which case that was enough to kind of crowd out Bernie Sanders at that point. So
Yeah, I was just thinking about the South, because the media plays a lot into this. They obviously wanted the establishment guy in at the time, but Bernie probably would have gotten second place in a lot of those Southern state contests that they kept saying Bernie can't get Black supporters in the South and all this crap, which I know was a lie completely, because he had advantages when it came to young voters and certain demographics. He had very big advantages. So considering his weaknesses, he still probably would have gotten second place finishes under a ranked choice system, compared to what he would have done under traditional system, and he still would have been a viable and probably the number 1 candidate, considering all 50 states.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that but it's important to be clear that ranked choice doesn't benefit any ideology or candidate. It's just as I said, the only winner out of ranked choice is the voter, and whatever their preferences are. So in that particular election, looking at the data, it looks like Bernie was probably overall the preferred candidate, right? And so ranked choice would have rewarded him accordingly. But I think there are other places, like if let's play a different version of play that same thing out, but different. Let's say the candidates had really, like, it was ranked choice and the candidates knew how to do that properly, and they managed to persuade their voters. They said, look, let's say they said Bernie can't get elected, right? And they managed to persuade their voters saying, look, you should really rank the other more moderate or centrist candidates as our 2, 3, 4. And they did a successful job persuading that. Then they would have been able to take advantage of that, of ranked choice system, to get what they want there, because if they'd managed to consolidate but persuade their voters to do the same, right? So what I'm saying is that the system itself is neutral, but it just rewards voters, right? But and it expresses their true preference. But there are things you can do to take advantage of the system, and or not take it, but to do well in that system, like things like build coalitions. Like what I just described is, if the centrists had built a proper coalition with each other under a ranked choice system, they would have been able to crowd him out, right? So things like coalition building are strongly rewarded in a ranked choice system. Just literally just being nice to each other. I think the reason why Sarah Palin probably lost in Alaska was because she didn't know how to use the system properly. She just said, like, only vote 1 for me and don't rank anyone else. That's what she said, which is the worst thing you can do, right? If she had built a proper coalition with Begich, they could have crowded out Peltola. So playing nice is heavily rewarded. Coalition building, heavily rewarded. So So that's what I would love your viewers to come away thinking, is that the system doesn't benefit any ideology, but it does benefit all of us, right? By the net effect of it. Yeah.
That's a big mindset adjustment, and it's one that needs to happen, in my opinion. And just that comment you made about the fairness of the system with the ranked choice voting. There's just so much more that I want to ask about that, but maybe we can save that for another interview down the road.
We can, although I've still got a couple of minutes if you do want to ask one more.
I do want to talk about rank the vote some. I didn't want it to be all about that, but I do want my audience to know what rank the vote is and what are some of the objectives of that organization.
Sure. So Rank the Vote is a grassroots leadership development organization, and our goal is to build the ranked choice voting movement up, right? And I think that it's a combination of, so as you asked earlier about how do we get this thing passed everywhere, right? It comes down to people, right? It comes down to us becoming activists, becoming community oriented, and Rank the Vote is how you do it. So we have state chapters. I think we work with, I mean, as I said, there's ranked choice voting activity in like all but 5 states currently, right? So, and Rank the Vote works with over half of those, right? Those states. And what we try and do is get our state groups to, we train them on getting people, money, and endorsements, right? So how do we get volunteers who can, go and educate other people about ranked choice voting, who can build a movement, who can lobby their legislators? How do we fundraise to build the movement, especially if they've got a campaign coming up? And how do we get endorsements from other civic organizations and community groups as well? So an example of what they might do in that is that they have a speakers bureau in their state. Each state chapter has a speakers bureau, which will go out and talk to everyone, every civic organization they can about ranked choice voting, and then get them to endorse the concept. And so really it's very much about that grassroots level, and that with a build up towards local, like city or statewide campaigns. So as to how we do it, that's exactly how you do it. Go to rankthevote.us and join your local chapter and get involved. Right? That's the key. That's how you get it locally, right? Because they're the leaders in building the movement up.
And how long has this been an organization?
Yes, so Rank the Vote itself is actually very new. It's been around since 2019. And they've launched a huge number of chapters in something like 22 chapters in just a few years. Before that, though, the reason is that, and my previous organization that I was working with, Fair Vote. So Fair Vote has been around for like 30 years. And they're a think tank and an advocacy organization as well. And they've got incredible research, right? And they're sort of they're the thought leaders of the movement. And so they built up a lot of chapters as well over the years. So, and so, yeah, I think they'll founded, yeah, maybe in the early 90s, Fair Vote was founded. Yeah.
And you all collaborate on a regular basis?
Yeah. So because I actually just moved over from Fair Vote to Rank the Vote. And in fact, I'm currently in the Fair Vote office. Yeah. So we're very, very close partners. Yeah. Because, and it's just a different focus. So Rank the Vote is more, what more about is building up state chapters and building up a movement. Whereas Fair Vote is increasingly focused on research and being thought leaders and working with the national media, things like that.
Well, I tell you, I don't want to keep this going any longer because I know you have places to go and I do too. But I do have lots of other questions based on just the last 10 minutes, because I didn't even really want to ask about the lobbying and stuff, because I really want to focus more on just the process of how ranked choice voting works. And I think it may be beneficial if I invite you back on. Maybe we can have like some kind of a workshop to where people can practice like a ballot. I think people have issues just filling out a simple ballot and just understanding the options of on the ballot when they see it. And so I think that that would be really beneficial to sort of have diagrams and, showing how the system works.
I can do that because we've got this technology online, and I can put a link together, put a vote. We've regularly, actually, I should have done that for today. Is a thing called Rank It. Well, there's quite a few. There's online tools you can use. We can put a vote. Sometimes we'll vote on who do you think is going to win the Oscar, best picture, for
Oh,
example, or favorite ice cream or whatever. And then we can do a live vote and then show you how it works. So yeah, I wish I'd thought of that before. We can do that on the next time.
no doubt. That sounds good. But
Okay.
anyway, Vinay, I appreciate you accepting the invitation. And that makes us feel good knowing that you are open to a second invitation down the road. And I think the audience would definitely benefit from that. And that's what we promote on this forum is, and I'm not completely against like bringing on people from the major parties, but it's really, if you follow the episodes, you see that I deliberately get people who are working outside of that system because this is a way to kind of coalition build outside of that because we need to focus more on the people who don't have as much representation as so that they can build their representation from the bottom up. And I think that's what we need to do together. And working with the libertarians, the Greens, um, several independents that I've had on the forum. And again, I just think that sometimes that the D and the R maybe with the lobbying influences may not have the best interest of the minor parties, at least in this system that we're under now, just based on the corruption aspect and where the money goes and stuff. But that's why I didn't get into that stuff because it can be a little bit more muddy. And this focuses more on the process as opposed to the personalities and what goes on behind the scenes that may not be as satisfying. But maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later down the road, the lobbying and how that works.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
Okay. But I appreciate it. Do you have any other departing words or anything? I know you've already plugged in how people can contact you in case they had a question for you. Do you have any departing words?
No, just well, simply that we hope to see you involved very soon. Please do get involved because it's not going to happen by itself, right? It's only going to happen through people coming together, forming communities, and then being determined to change the system. And yes, my last thing is that it's very possible we can do this, right? We're already doing it, right? As I said, we've from 10 to 62 municipalities in the space of a few years. Next year could be the biggest year ever, correct? In fact, probably will be. It probably will be. So, but we can't do it without you. So we hope you get involved.
100%. On that note, beautiful people, I hope you've enjoyed this interview. Interview 23 will be in store tomorrow, and you'll have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much, Vinay, again for joining us.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.